Well, general questions. The function of endocrine system is the regulation, right? Understand what is endocrine gland, what's the difference of endocrine versus exocrine. It produces in the blood, right? It releases in the blood rather than someplace else. Understand the differences between the nervous and endocrine, okay? So one, nervous is local and fast, right? Endocrine is slower, but its actions are systemic because hormones enter the blood. Does that make sense? Good. Understand the idea how hormones can be stimulated. Okay, what can stimulate the hormonal production? Can it be a change in internal environment? Can change in the extracellular fluid concentrations? Yes, like ADH or parathyroid hormone. Can it be nervous stimulus? Yes, indirectly cortisol. The whole HPA axis is stimulated by the stress, by the nervous perception. Can it be another hormone? Well, of course. So we have three ways, right? Understand the difference between primary and secondary endocrine organs. 6 groups based on the chemical structure. So we talked about, that's I think second or third slide in the whole PowerPoint. Amines, peptides, proteins, then you have steroids, eicosanoids, and separately thyroid hormone. Okay, 6 groups. So, amines, peptides, proteins, water-soluble, eicosanoids, thyroid hormone, and sterols, so lipid-soluble, right? Now, based on the solubility, understand the implications. So, endocrine gland and the target organ. On the target organ, there will be a receptor. Receptor can be cell surface for water-soluble or in the cell with lipid-soluble, right? Okay, the receptors, yeah, paracrine, autocrine, and endocrine signaling. So autocrine is on the same cell, paracrine is like next, yes, and endocrine is far. So we call endocrine because hormone can be produced in the thyroid gland, signal to the fat cells located, I don't know, on the butt. Okay, so it's pretty far. Positive, negative feedback loops to exemplary hormones. The hormones that we talked about, the primary hormones, please know the regulation. That's kind of a very big, broad question, but it tells you what you should know. So when you look at the question about the hormone, how the hormone is regulated, you immediately have to think about the positive, negative feedback. We pretty much have only oxytocin as an example of positive feedback. Everything else is regulated by negative feedback. And you immediately have to think, what is the response? Okay? Well, prolactin, yes, prolactin is positive because it's stimulated by the suckling of the, yes, okay. But we didn't even talk about prolactin yet. We're going to talk about it in reproductive when we talk about breastfeeding, yes. There may be a question what it is. I mean, we mentioned prolactin. It's, prolactin is hormone that stimulates milk production, but we didn't talk about regulation. So I'm not going to ask you regulation. Remember, I don't ask anything that I didn't explain. Receptors for water-soluble hormones and signaling. I hope that those 3 mechanisms that we talked about the one mediated by adenylate. So 2G protein mediated adenylate cyclase, and phospholipase C, right? One tyrosine kinase mediated. So these three for water soluble. And general mechanism for lipid soluble hormones. They should be tattooed in your brain pretty much. Okay? You wake up in the night and just wake up and you picture it right away. Not even waking up, like being in a state of moonwalking. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions about this? I can promise there will be questions about the actions of the hormones, the signaling, and if you can picture it, you can answer it. What binds to the DNA? Complex between the hormone and receptor, right? What is the effect of cyclic AMP? It activates protein kinase, yes. What is the effect of IP3? Releases calcium. Okay? Any questions on this part? Good? Okay, pituitary hypothalamus. So anatomical and physiological relationship. Hypothalamus controls pituitary, right? Which part of the pituitary? Controls. Which part? It controls interior by producing either releasing or inhibiting hormones and delivering them through the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system, right? And then anterior pituitary produces its own hormones in response to the hypothalamic ones, right? What about posterior pituitary? What is the function of posterior pituitary? It stores the hormones of hypothalamus, two of them, ADH and oxytocin, right? It does not produce its own hormones. Hormones of the hypothalamus are easier to, so hypothalamic hormones and pituitary hormones are easier to think about when you think about the axis, okay? So growth hormone produced by which part? Growth hormone. Anterior pituitary gland stimulated by GHRH and inhibited by GHIH. Thyroid stimulating hormone is produced by, okay, all those anterior pituitary. So TSH stimulated by TRH, thyrotropin releasing hormone. ACTH is stimulated by CRH, corticotropin releasing hormone, right? Gonadotropins, follicle stimulating and luteinizing hormones, are under control of GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormones. What did we forget? Prolactin, under the control of prolactin inhibiting factor. Did I forget something? I hope I did. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. So you have to understand the difference in delivery, portal system for anterior pituitary, hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract, and the posterior pituitary. Okay, two hormones of the posterior pituitary, ADH and oxytocin. Understand the regulation of both also. Oxytocin is positive feedback, right? Pretty much the only one. ADH. Okay, ADH, antidiuretic produced in response to dehydration or in terms of osmolality. High osmolality, right? So high concentration of extracellular fluid. Your receptors in hypothalamus, they cannot detect low water content, but they can detect high solute content. Make sense? That's what they detect. So high solute content means dehydration. Negative feedback, that will sound back when we talk about thyroid and adrenal gland. Remember so for growth hormone, what are the effects? Growth. Well, does it stimulate growth of muscles and bones directly or indirectly? Indirectly. Through what? Liver. Insulin-like growth factors, which have what effect on the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary? They inhibit release of growth hormone from anterior pituitary and GHRH from hypothalamus. IGFs, do they stimulate any hormones? GHIH, right? Inhibiting hormone from hypothalamus. Does that make sense? So if you can draw this little negative feedback loop, good. If you can't, bad. So you should be able to. Yeah, that's pretty much it for exclusively pituitary hormones. No axis involved. Okay. Oxytocin. What stimulates production of oxytocin? Initial kick is from estrogen stimulates the contractions, and then contractions stimulate oxytocin. Oxytocin stimulates the contractions. Contractions stimulate oxytocin. Right? If you have a question, don't hesitate to interrupt me right away. Dwarfism, gigantism, acromegaly. No one know what they're associated with. Okay, so low, high GH, right? Know when it happens, okay? So this is the childhood, this is adulthood. What's the diabetes insipidus? Lack, So which hormone is not produced or underproduced? ADH, low levels of ADH. So since ADH is anti-diuretic, if it's gone, you cannot keep water in, so you're going to pee a lot. So you're going to lose a lot of water, and you're going to feel thirst all the time. Okay? Questions on that part? Alright. Thyroid parathyroid. They kind of grouped based on the location, but thyroid, how thyroxine is synthesized and stored by thyroid follicles. That usually scares the shit out of students. You don't have to know the exact biochemical pathways. So I don't really care if you know what thyroid peroxidase is, really. What you have to know is that iodine is taken into the follicular cell, right? And then from the follicular cell, it gets into the follicle. In the follicle, it attaches to the tyrosine residues in thyroglobulin. Eventually, blah, 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 we have enough tyrosine, enough iodine on those tyrosines. We get T3 and T4. Thyroglobulin goes into the follicular cell, back in the follicular cell. Tyrosines, Yeah, but lysosome is in the cell. You have to remember that. So if you have the Yeah, but lysosome is intracellular structure, right? So it's got to be in the cell. So if this is follicle, and if this is follicular cell, right, then you have, that's iodine direction, okay? That's iodinated thyroglobulin. And here are your lysosomes. That's where the tyrosine is cut away from thyroglobulin. Lysosomes are intracellular. Does that make sense? For each hormone, know what stimulates it. So for thyroxine, what's the stimulus? Low BMR. Like you cold, like really, really cold, and your BMR is low. So the result should be increased BMR, right? Know the effects of thyroid hormone, like high blood pressure, high heart rate, high energy production, breakdown of any energy sources like fat, okay? Because you need energy to increase your BMR. Be able to picture the axis. Hypothalamus, TRH. Anterior Pituitary, TSH. Thyroid Gland, thyroid hormone. When you do that, and I ask you, describe me the axis, you must not forget two things. First, how negative feedback is established. So, thyroid hormone, it inhibits release of TRH from hypothalamus and TSH from pituitary. Second thing that you must not forget, the effects of it. So then I have a question. So the whole thing is just to inhibit, you know? So we produce thyroid hormone to inhibit its own synthesis? No. So please give me the effects as well, right? Symptoms, so myxedema, low, hyperthyroidism, up, goiter. In goiter, do we have high levels of thyroid or low? In nutritional in dietary goiter, high or low? Low levels because we have not enough iodine, right? Not enough iodine. The gland is large, but since there's no iodine, it does not produce the functional hormone. And it's large because it tries to compensate for the lack of the hormone. Now, always think about it. If we have high thyroid, what's going to be levels of TSH, TRH? Low. If we have low thyroid, they're going to be high. Okay, so think about that teeter-totter. Is that clear? I want you to know words Graves and Hashimoto. Graves is high, Hashimoto is low. Both autoimmune. So in Hashimoto disease, if it's low levels of thyroid hormone, what you can expect about levels of TRH, TSH? They'll be high. Is that clear for everybody? Good. Parathyroid calcitonin. I don't really know what can be simpler. Really. Okay. Low calcium, parathyroid, high calcium. High calcium, calcitonin, normal, well, not low, but normal calcium. Does that make sense? Now, since we rarely experience constantly elevated levels of calcium, parathyroid seems to be the most important. Where does your body take calcium from? Bones. How do we call this process? Well, osteoclasts are active, and what do they do with the bone? Resorb the bone. It's a resorption. Okay? I have this word. Look it up. It's yes. Okay. Good that you brought it up. I can explain it. So when we say resorption, it's specifically a term that we use for the bone resorption. Okay? It's just so it happened. We use resorption for calcium being taken out of the bone. Resorption of the bone. Okay? Or we resorb the calcium from the bone. Absorption usually refers to the process in the intestines. Okay? When we absorb something from the nutrients. We're going to talk about it when we talk about digestive. Okay? We absorb from nutrients. We absorb calcium from intestines. Which another hormone is absolutely important for it. Crucial for it. Parathyroid hormone does not directly stimulate absorption of calcium. It stimulates another hormone, which also happens to be a vitamin. Vitamin D, there you go. So it stimulates activation, it activates vitamin D, and vitamin D increases intestinal absorption. But, okay, does that make sense? Reabsorption. Reabsorption usually refers to kidneys. Why? A little digression. You don't have to know how kidneys work yet, but a little digression. Kidneys work in a very interesting way. It's like cleaning room. Imagine that you have a lot of junk mixed with the stuff that you need. Instead of picking only the stuff that you need, you collect everything and throw it away. And then you go to the trash can and start picking up things that you need. That's kind of a interesting way to clean up the room, but that's what kidneys do. First of all, they throw everything out from the blood, and then they reabsorb, collect back whatever the body needs, including calcium. That's why we call the reabsorption of calcium. So 3 ways to get calcium: resorb it from the bones, reabsorb it from urine back in the blood, in the kidneys, and absorb it from the nutrients, from the food in the intestine. Does that make sense? Great. If you have too much parathyroid hormone, what's going to happen to your calcium levels? Too much parathyroid. Yeah, they're going to go up. You're probably going to have very bad bones and a lot of kidney stones. If you don't have people who experience the thyrectomy, complete thyrectomy, parathyroid gland is gone, remember, okay? And they don't have that regulator. They usually suffer from low blood counts, or they have to take the exogenous parathyroid hormones. Does that make sense? There was something else I wanted to mention. Oh, which cells produce parathyroid hormone? Chief cells. Which chief cells? Calcitonin. Which gland produces calcitonin? Thyroid gland. Parafollicular cells of the thyroid gland produce calcitonin. I didn't create this trick. Blame Mother Nature. So hypercalcemia, hypocalcemia. Which is worse? Which should be of more concern? Hypocalcemia? Yes, low calcium is usually of more concern. So what are the consequences of low calcium? Except for the bones. Well, yeah, brittle bones, that's fine. What else? Yes, muscle twitching, okay? Actually, different types of nervous system problems. Okay, spasms, muscle spasms. If it's a spasm of diaphragm, you're dead. Okay, what are the association? What are the problems with hypercalcemia except for the renal calculi, the kidney stones? What else? Muscle weakness, and it may create cardiac problems like arrhythmia. If heart does not contract good enough, we've got a problem. Does that make sense? Any questions on thyroid, parathyroid? What about thyroid? Is that water fat soluble? Fat soluble. Where's the receptor? In the cell. I will not ask you to distinguish between cytoplasm and nucleus. I don't really care that much. But you have to tell apart inside the cell or on the surface. Absolutely. Yes. Uh-huh.
Say the fat cells.
Yes.
For every system that they work pretty much the same. Are we going to have to know each different cell?
Wait. For fat soluble hormones?
Yes.
You have to know the basic principle that the receptor is in the cell. So all I want you to know about fat soluble, like retinoid X receptor, oh, come on. No, not the names. I mean, look, Look, let me be completely honest. If I would be 100% sure that by Monday you will know, not you personally, but you all know perfectly each step of the hormonal regulation, and like I wake you up in the middle of the night, giving you a phone call, and you just wake up and just give it to me right away, I would start asking you about the receptor. But it's not going to happen. So I will be happy if you answer those questions about the signaling correctly, without any references to the names of the receptors. So what do you have to know? Binds to the intracellular receptor, the complex, not the freaking hormone, not the receptor itself, but the complex binds to DNA. DNA, not the RNA, not the protein, not something else. DNA stimulates transcription, not translation, not replication, goddamn transcription, which produces RNA, not the protein, not the DNA, RNA. And RNA is translated into the fucking protein, not back into the DNA. So, if you know all those steps, you're good. Okay? I've seen all of it. So don't you think it will surprise me? So please don't surprise me. So please give me the right order. I don't want to embarrass you, but this is important. Because, look, how can we counteract the action of a certain hormone? We can block the receptor, right? There you go. Now, your drug that blocks the receptor, should it be on the surface? Should it be inside the cell? Think about this. We talked about the signaling through the for water-soluble hormones. The feature of that signal, remember we talked about, it's like an avalanche manner. You start with pretty much one hormonal molecule, okay? 1 G protein, and then adenylate cyclase starts to churn out CMPs, thousands of them. And each CMP will stimulate thousands of protein kinases. So you have millions now. And each protein kinase will phosphorylate thousands of proteins, in billions now. So you have that spread, like a domino effect. You talk about fat soluble, they're going to stimulate genes. It's going to take forever. But it's going to be long standing effect, because now we talk about gene expression. Gene expression lasts for a long time, right? So it's that really has implications for the longevity of the effects. Okay. Adrenal gland. 3 layers. Know the hormones that are produced by each layer. Mineralocorticoids, which is aldosterone. Glucocorticoids, which is cortisol. And adrenocorticoids, or androgens. Now what you have to know about the function for aldosterone. The stimuli. Either low blood pressure, right? Or, what else? Huh? Actually, good. Electrolyte balance. High potassium. We need to spare something else. Stress. Very good. Stress. Right? So I have 3 stimuli. In all cases, what aldosterone does? How does it increase blood volume? How? How water gets back in the ECF? It retains sodium, and water goes behind the sodium into the extracellular fluid. It increases blood volume. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's why we have high blood pressure when we are under constant stress. Okay? Good? Trying to just crunching it through. Okay, so again, stimulus response. Look, I may ask you, aldosterone will increase direct reabsorption of water. Is that so? direct reabsorption of water? No. Increase sodium retention? Yes. Increase potassium retention? No. Potassium actually is being spared, so we take in sodium in exchange for potassium. Okay, so if you can picture, that's awesome. And you have to think about this. Hormone produces the effect that counteracts the stimulus. Does that make sense? In some cases, it's a little bit more complicated, but like parathyroid, it's as simple. Thyroid, it's simple. Pancreas, it's simple. Okay? You have stimulus and effect counteracts negative feedback. Does that make sense? Cortisol. Stimulus is stress, right? What is probably the major effect of cortisol? Actually, it counteracts inflammation. It decreases it. On the metabolic level, what does it do? It increases blood glucose. Through what? How can it increase blood glucose? I mean, where do you get glucose? Glycolysis uses glucose, right? It will increase appetite. Gluconeogenesis, yes. But before you get to gluconeogenesis, what is the breakdown of glucagon and something else? When you run out of glucagon. Oh, not glycogen. Sorry, when you run out of glycogen, lipolysis, yes, fat. So you have to think always, about glycogen, fat, and eventually when you run out of fat, what you're going to use? Protein. And we're going to take this protein from muscles. Why muscles? This question is not going to be an exam. Why muscles? You have a lot, and second, it's kind of not essential. You can't break down enzymes. You're going to die. Yes. Yeah, you can replenish them pretty well. Although there are some studies suggest that if you starve yourself really bad, then muscle structure will never be completely repaired when you go back from starving. Okay. So glycogen, fat, and when you run out of those sources, protein. It's all getting broken down. So how would you call this hormone? Is that anabolic hormone or catabolic hormone? Catabolic. Okay, hormone that stimulates breakdown. Cool? For androgens, we didn't discuss them in very much details, except for adrenogenital syndrome. Okay, so you have to know that they have a supportive function. We don't really know how important they are in fully functional adults, but if they are overproduced in androgenital syndrome, then they lead to the masculinization of females and partial feminization of males. Now, can anyone tell me what is the mechanism? Why there is overproduction of those androgens? Okay, so corticosteroids, good. Now think about this. If corticosteroids are not produced by dona fasciculata, what's going to happen to the levels of CRH? They could go up, ACTH, up. So ACTH will stimulate the gland, the whole adrenal cortex. Does that make sense so far? Corticosteroids, are they going to be produced? No, because you can't. But androgens will be. That overstimulation leads to the overproduction of androgens. How can you treat this disease? What is the simplest way? Yeah, take corticosteroids and it's all gone, right? Does that make sense? Two syndromes that you have to know, Addison's and Cushing's. Cushing's is high or low corticosteroids in Cushing's. In Cushing's they high, in Addison they low. Does that make sense? Yeah. Buffalo hump and moon face in Cushing's, and fatigue and muscle weakness in Addison's. Okay. Pancreas. Islets of Langerhans. I'm going to show you things that you may see on the exam. Okay? In terms of anatomy. Which means identify. I don't really care about PP cells, alpha cells. What do they produce? Glucagon, beta, insulin, delta, somatostatin. Okay? Somatostatin, or I'm going to put it here, GHIH. Right? Negative feedback. Come on, what can be simpler? High glucose, insulin, low, normal glucose. Low glucose, glucagon, normal glucose. Well, you would be too optimistic if you think that's it. That's it. Because I really want you to know how high glucose becomes normal. Bless you. So what does insulin do? Stimulates the uptake of glucose into the cells, right? When glucose is in the cells, what can happen to it? Used in the process of which, the first part, glycolysis / cellular respiration. If we're done with cellular respiration, we produced as much ATP as we can. It's going to be next. How can we store glucose? Stimulates fat. How do we call fancy word for fat synthesis? Lipogenesis. What else? How else can we store glucose? In the form of glycogen, and we call it glycogenolysis. Know those words. Lipogenesis, glycogenolysis, glycolysis. Okay? If glucose is too low in the blood, which hormone will be produced? Glucagon. And glucagon will do what? New sugar, how do we call it? Gluconeogenesis. And you also can break down things. Fat, it's going to be lipolysis, and glycogen. So this time it's going to be glycogenolysis. Okay? This is, I know, this is kind of confusing, but this is something that you must know. So I promise I will ask you. Now I will ask you in these terms, not in the baby terms, but in these fancy terms. So you may see question, insulin increases uptake and stimulates glycolysis, decreases uptake and stimulates glycogenesis. You see? So you have to look at like the whole statement and see if it makes sense or not. Does that make sense? Good. Negative feedback. Okay. Diabetes. Two types of diabetes. Type 1, you don't make insulin because your beta cells are gone. And type 2, what what is your glucose levels in type 2? Are they elevated? It's a freaking diabetes, of course. What about insulin levels? They normal or higher than normal. Okay? Why? Huh? Insulin resistance. A cell do not respond to the insulin signaling. Right? Cool. Does anyone remember how insulin is stimulated? The signaling opens what initiates the release of insulin from beta cells? What's the signal for insulin production? Glucose. Glucose. Does it diffuse into the cell or transport it into the cell? Huh? Well, when I ask the question like that, all 98% of the questions I ask, you can think through. So, if insulin release stimulated by high blood sugar, there's a lot of glucose in the blood / extracellular fluid. It's a lot that should it diffuse into the cell, or if it's high outside of the cell, it's probably going to diffuse, right? Does that make sense? Because we start with a high glucose in the blood and low in the cell. So you have facilitated diffusion of glucose. What does it do next? Closes some sort of a channel. I'll give you a hint. Closure of that channel will depolarize the cell, will make it's closing potassium channel, because potassium usually leaves the cell. When you close potassium channel, potassium stays in the cell. Potassium is charged positively. So what's going to happen to the membrane potential? It goes up, becomes more positive. Depolarization. What is the regular response of pretty much any cell to depolarization? Which channels open? Calcium. Calcium channels open. And usual effect of calcium influx into the cells start to release something. Well, pretty much the answer is stuff, in this case insulin. Whatever's in the vesicles. Does that make sense? Sorry, vesicles released. Okay, so glucose closes potassium channels. Cell depolarizes. Depolarization opens calcium channels. Calcium influx causes release of insulin. So it's pretty elegant. And then insulin facilitates everything else. Does that make sense? There are going to be questions about like glycolysis, glycogenolysis, lipolysis, lipogenesis, and stuff like that. There will be a question where you have to differentiate type 1, type 2 diabetes. Okay? Don't mix up diabetes mellitus and diabetes insipidus. Those are completely different conditions. Any question on the pancreas? Gonads. Where are they? What they do? Maturation of sperm in the male, maturation of oocyte in the female. Know that gonadotropins are FSH and LH. Gonadal hormones are testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. Okay, produced by the gonads. Don't mix them up. It happens. Don't mix them up. Understand the axis. I will ask you about the male axis. Right? Male axis. So, we're not going to talk about ovarian cycle. Okay? What we're going to talk about is this idea: hypothalamus, anterior pituitary gonads, GnRH, FSH, LH, testosterone, okay, and same testosterone blocks hypothalamus, anterior pituitary, and there is another guy called inhibin. It's a hormone, yes. Yes.
About like when we draw these certain feedback things,
Yes.
how you say you can use like explaining it or the drawing.
Yes.
Would just like if you literally just put that drawing, would that be enough? Or like depend because like if you say like describe like the negative.
Well,
feedback,
I would suggest now look. At least explain what the crosses and the arrows mean. So where it's a stimulation, where it's inhibition, because you have amazing visual memory. I know that. You have amazing visual memory. I mean, in the end, if you memorized it like the image without understanding what it is, when you get to the nursing program or, I don't know, any other health program, they will start talking about this. Say in relation to pharma or pathophysiology. If you don't understand this, it's not my problem anymore, it's your problem. Okay? So it's kind of, I try to shove the knowledge, down your throat, but if you refuse to do that, if you have like very strong gag reflex, what can I do? Okay, I cannot feed you through the tube.
And you said it is okay if we just use like the acronym for everything. We don't have
Yes, well, yes, absolutely. Like ACTH, CRH. Now, sorry, if you mix up TSH and TRH and switch places, that's a mistake. It's one letter, that's the mistake. Okay? So when you use the acronyms, I presume you know the difference, right? Because I understand how hard it is to spell, yes.
Like with the photo, that like if you're going to talk about testosterone, you have to talk about the effects of.
Yeah, you have to write down the effects of testosterone. I mean, you can actually picture like the breast growth if you want, but it'll probably take more than just to write like secondary sex characteristics. Hip widening and everything else. You can picture. Go ahead. Any questions on the gonads? We good? Pineal gland. Melatonin regulation of sleep-wake cycle. Thymus. There are three hormones, thymopoietin, thymolin, and thymosin, that regulate the maturation of T cells, the lymphocytes. That's it. That's it. That's all you have to know. Pineal, probably interesting. About thymus we can talk when we get to the immunity. So this fancy statement means T lymphocyte maturation. Okay. Now for secondary endocrine organs, stimulus, hormone, effect. For ANP, what's the stimulus? Think about the name. Natriuretic. Natri, same for sodium. So it puts sodium where? Into the, if it's uretic, urine. So if sodium goes in the urine, what's going to happen to the urine volume? It's going to increase because water will follow it. So what's going to happen to the blood volume? It's going to go down. Blood pressure, it's going to go down. That's your effect. So what's going to be the stimulus? High blood pressure. Okay? These three guys stimulate digestion. What would be the stimulus? F word, 4 letters. Food. Ghrelin is the hormone of hunger. Okay? Empty stomach stimulates ghrelin release. Kidneys, 2 completely different hormones. Renin Result of the renin is what? Some things you just have to memorize. Renin. What is the result? That's different one. So what's the result? Blood pressure, high blood pressure. Result is high blood pressure. So it's produced in response to low blood pressure. Okay, erythropoietin. What's the result? Increase of red blood cells. What's the stimulus? Either low red blood cells like anemia or hypoxia. Bones. FGF23. Skip it. I mean, phosphate metabolism. That's pretty much it. Increased phosphate release. Osteocalcin. Insulin-like effect. So it increases, stimulates insulin release. Skin. What is another name for cholecalciferol? Vitamin D. The effect of vitamin D. Absorption of calcium in the intestines. So stimulus well, it's kind of an interesting in terms of stimulus. It doesn't respond to low calcium per se. Low calcium stimulates parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone activates vitamin D. Does that make sense? Okay. Liver. What is another name for somatomedin? IGF, insulin-like growth factors. So it's just a part of the growth hormone regulation. Thrombopoietin. Low thrombocytes, low platelets. Okay? Low platelets stimulate thrombopoietin. Thrombopoietin increases the number of platelets. Angiotensin. It's part of the renin-angiotensin aldosterone system. So if aldosterone is involved, what's the result of angiotensin production? High blood pressure. Okay, it's indirectly stimulated by low one. Hepcidin. What you have to know about hepcidin is that it's iron metabolism. Adipose tissue, leptin and adiponectin. Now here we are. Leptin gives you a sense of satiety. Okay, satiety. Ghrelin gives you a feeling of hunger. Leptin, feeling of satiety. You're full. Both of them, leptin and adiponectin, participate in food intake regulation. Okay. It's pretty much they kind of limit the amount of food that you take in. Does that make sense? Any questions? Well, they work through absolutely different receptors. Adiponectin is kind of a weird thing, really, because normally concentrations of hormones in the blood, we talk about nanograms per mil, like 2-3 nanograms. Adiponectin, in some samples, it's milligrams. It's abnormal for hormone to have such a high concentration, so we don't really know why, but yes, they regulate food uptake and regulate food expenditure, energy expenditure. Now, any questions on the study guide? No, okay. Let me try. I don't know if it's going to work. I mean, it will work eventually. Okay, let's keep our fingers crossed because it's all getting recorded. That's important. Okay, it's all getting recorded. So these images are going to be a part of the video if the goddamn machine is cooperating. I don't know. I'm going to adjust right now. Yes, okay. Yes, awesome. So you got it on the video, okay? So you can actually watch it. So I don't have to take the pictures and post them on the blackboard. It's all part of the video. right? So this is 200x of Langerhans islet. This thing is Langerhans islet, okay? Sorry. See it now? So this is in the bigger magnification. Okay, pretty cool. So if you see that, you got to tell me what it is. The question may not necessarily be like what it is. Okay, but something else. Where you can find it. What does it do? Okay? Which cells aren't there? Or which cells are there? Right? Is that clear enough? Okay, adrenal is the next. Where's the... Okay. Okay, let me see if it gives us some better perspective. It's probably the hardest one. Okay. Let me erase my drawing here. It's actually, adrenal has quite a characteristic appearance. So this is it's a 200 magnification. You can see the capsule, okay, and you can see zona glomerulosa, and then kind of, sort of, zona fasciculata, and zona reticularis is deeper. Anatomically, you have to recognize this is adrenal. This is the slide that you will see. It's going to lay here, okay? Maybe not necessarily this exact section, but you can tell by different appearance of cells in this layer and in this layer. Okay, it's all recorded. Let me try and see if I can show it to you on the larger scale. Yeah, I kind of can. That's why I don't like the anatomical samples of the adrenal gland, because you can pretty much see zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, but everything else is kind of not really distinguishable. On the opposite side, very distinctive is the thyroid gland. You've all seen that picture, right? Remember? So what is that? What is that? Tell me. Which gland? What is here? Well, I mean, which gland? Thyroid. What about this? Parathyroid. Okay? Now we'll make it larger. Even more larger. Junior, can you help me? Can you just shut down the light, please? Appreciate that. Yeah, just, you can, yeah, completely, yeah, good. Okay, you can see that? So cells that would surround follicle will be follicular. I will not ask you to pick between follicular and parafollicular, because we won't be able to tell them apart, okay? As long as you can, if you have like beta cells, chief cells, follicular cells, I don't know, something else. As long as you have that right answer, follicular cells, you're good, okay? Now, these cells, what would they be? Cells of the parathyroid gland. Huh? That produce parathyroid hormone. Chief cells, yes. What would be this structure? Follicle. Good? Good? Was it clear in terms of the slides and everything? Terrific. Okay. Let's take a break.